5 Network. This is Morning Line with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line. Nick Barris here with you on a Tuesday. Good show on tap. Something that I think a lot of people are talking about, not just looking at in the city of Nashville, but maybe across the state and in other communities as well, thinking, well, do we want to add something along these lines, and where do we go with it, and how things are going to work in Nashville? I'm talking about the Community Oversight Board. All right, you know that has now come into existence. They've had a couple of meetings, I understand, at this point, and we're going to talk about what that should do and where we go against the backdrop of an awful lot of other things happening with legal challenges to it, to state lawmakers maybe looking at ways maybe to dilute some of the powers of this board, which is there in place to kind of, investigate and look into various complaints or situations involving law enforcement and the like. We're going to get into that this morning with two members of Community Oversight Now. They're not board members, but they are part of the organization that I think had a very large hand in getting this board into existence. With us this morning are Nick Caven, Arnold Hayes. Thank you both, gentlemen, for coming on this morning. I'm right about that when I say, this board, 2 meetings you said to this point since the members were chosen?
Yes. Yep.
And just getting the ball rolling. It's just we know what it's supposed to do, but hasn't really had a chance to do it yet. And there's all this other stuff going on. I guess the idea from your perspective is, hey, go do your job. These other things, we'll just have to see how they play out and deal with them, but there's not a lot you can do about what's happening at the legislature. Sure, you can lobby or whatever. And what's happening with this legal challenge that the FOP has going to the Supreme Court on the election and that made it happen. But is your take, let's get this thing going and let them do their job?
I would love for Nashville and Tennessee to just let them do their job, hands off the COB, and let them do that. That would be great. But since that's not happening, we have to find as many ways that we can to push back.
Yeah.
Because the board needs to be concentrating on getting set up and the complaints and everything. And that's what I feel our responsibility is as activists is to actually make sure that they have a fair chance.
Gotcha.
And to the board's credit, they actually are working on a statement to be released from the board's letterhead and from their official board to say that they denounce the legislature's move to try and limit their powers. So they're taking it upon themselves to be activists for their own board.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, both of you, if you can weigh in, just for our viewers, and this was a big story, and we all kind of saw the coverage of what it would do. In both of your minds, talk about what the ultimate mission of this board is.
This board ultimately is supposed to provide transparency and accountability to our police department here in Nashville. So actually one of the biggest, one big reason why we did this is because both the community and the police officers themselves don't have a lot of trust in the current disciplinary system in MNPD. There's actually a study the FOP released last year in which they surveyed members of the Fraternal Order of Police in Nashville, and they found that less than half were comfortable with the current disciplinary way the discipline happens within the MNPD. So this is a problem not just on the community side, but on the police side. So we're trying to just provide police and communities with a different independent avenue to seek justice.
And if I can add, allegations of misconduct against police officers right now, the only place to go is to police and complain if you have a complaint. But now that you have an independent board in place that will be hearing complaints, and also as they do investigations, if they find things that need to be improved in the criminal justice system, they will also recommend those, make recommendations. So that'll be great.
All right, now the FOP, of course, not a big fan of this, and they were not. And I understand what you just voiced in terms of what some of their surveys have told them about officer morale and what they think about this. But the FOP and the police would maybe say, the viewer on the outside watching, well, they're against this. Maybe this is just a group that's going to target and be out to get police. And before the show, you were saying. That's not the idea here. The idea is you may just as easily say we're investigating a complaint and the officer did nothing wrong as you may say we investigated and the officer maybe used excessive force here.
And should 1% possibly, I don't know what the percentage is, but should 1% of police officers that are actually committing these type of acts, should they be allowed to mess things up for the entire police force and put their lives in danger because the community doesn't feel that they're trustworthy and that complaints are going to be fairly investigated? So that's what I'm saying. I think it's the 1% that's allowed to let that happen. And yes, it will definitely protect police officers, because as you build trust in the community, that's going to be safer for police officers too.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Now, the COB and the way it's set up and how it came into the final push really became something because of the officer-involved shootings. Yes. Hambrick and Delkey, and that's not because, oh gee, we need to form this COB because we think the officer here is being treated unfairly. I think people are worried that based on some of the video and what decisions people see it differently, but that based on the video, we think that Delkey's not going to be held accountable, and we need to pass the COB to hold him accountable. That's what some people are going to say. Now, who knows what this board would say about the evidence in this case, but that's where it came from. That's where it came from. So people are going to think, well, they're out to get the cops.
Yeah, it certainly did initially arise from those police-involved shootings, but over the process, this was a 1.5 year long campaign to get this on the ballot and then to get it passed. We encountered and heard from dozens of officers in Nashville who were reticent to voice their support publicly, but they called our number and would say, I really appreciate what you're doing. Particularly officers of color did not feel comfortable with the current disciplinary practices in the MNPD. So I think initially it was certainly community focused, but then it became an even broader community perspective of cops need this too.
And I'd like to expand on that a little bit. And it was more of a bigger push once we had officer-involved shootings. But again, organizations including the NAACP have been pushing for some type of oversight for over 30 years, in Nashville. And also prior to Jacquees Clemens getting killed and also Daniel Hamrick getting killed, there was a Driving While Black report that actually talked about a COB. And actually, Mayor Berry even had I don't know if it was called listening sessions or whatever, but out of that they even talked about a COB, but that was before either one of those young men were killed.
All right, we're going to take phone calls, but before we do that, I wanted to hit on a couple of the subjects that are out in the news right now on the periphery of what the COB has to deal with. First, you touched on it a moment ago, the idea that the legislature is looking at a bill that might, among other things, limit the COB's ability to subpoena people. All right, and I want your take, if that passes, how much damage does that do to the COB's ability to investigate complaints if they're not able to compel someone to come and answer questions for them? Is that a devastating blow if it passes, or is it something that can be worked with?
I think it's something that can be worked with, but it would be a very big blow because I think even though subpoena power is often not used, just the fact that it's there, the threat of it being there, so that would, and also considering the fact that Knoxville has had subpoena power for some time. I know that at one time Memphis had subpoena power, but strangely now Nashville has this probably a board that's probably the strongest, one of the strongest in the nation now. And now they're wanting to take away subpoena power. That's strange.
Yeah. Do you agree with him that losing the subpoena power would hamstring the board to some degree, possibly in some investigations?
It could. I mean, like you said, Knoxville has had subpoena power and hasn't had to use it. So I think it just brings legitimacy to the board itself.
It gives them a little teeth, is what it does.
Right. But I mean, on top of that, the bill abolishes employment requirements. It abolishes any kind of income requirement, which we felt was a very important part of this law. And it has led to the creation of this magnificent, diverse board. So we think that it could perhaps lead to a less diverse board or a more yeah, just not as a great board as it could be.
Okay. And the other question before we go to the break is late yesterday, the FOP filed with the Supreme Court. They had asked the Supreme Court to intervene and hadn't originally. Now they're doing it formally to challenge a whole separate issue about whether or not the election, it wasn't a Maine general election, so I don't know if the argument is maybe along the lines of, look, we didn't have as many people maybe voting because this ballot didn't have a bunch of sexy races in it, so not as many people went out to vote, so we didn't get a real good cross-section voting on the COB. It should not be something that's accepted. We should do it again in a much larger, diverse voting ballot. You know, it wasn't a huge election. Okay, it just wasn't. So they want to have it more in a general one. That's their challenge. Lower courts said no, it's been fine. What do you think about that challenge?
I really feel, believe it or not, I feel sorry for the FOP for wasting that type of money. As a person that really feels for people that have their backs against the wall at the least of these, and when I think about what could be done with that money that they're wasting on lawsuits, and even if you want to improve policing in Nashville, there are so many efforts that could be used that you could improve policing just by spending that money in Nashville.
So you believe it'll probably be a futile effort anyway. The Supreme Court won't rule likely on this for, it could be a year, but I mean, you don't think they'll uphold probably the lower court?
I don't know, but I wouldn't think so. I mean, I think since it's been turned down, I don't think it's much of a case, but you never know.
All right, listen, we'll take a break on that note. We've got some phone calls. If you have questions, these are not COB members, but they are with Community Oversight Now, a group that was very much behind the effort to get the COB in place. So we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll take phone calls, and we have more of our conversation about some of the activities of your group. We'll be back with more right after this.
Okay.